Actually, I started doing this together with Pavneet, but unfortunately she got sick, so the last 2 weeks she hasn't been able to put in anything. So basically her part of the presentation is on hold as it was last time. It hasn't moved any further, but I've tried to evolve. So we're looking at the crown as a shared space, basically, and just reflecting on the context of Auroville and the climate, and it's the main things are air, water, the trees, and the soil, and they're all in this together with us, as in we need them all and we have to protect them all, and so it's a very, just something we thought, okay, let's build on that. And then it goes into, from that, it goes into the porosity of things. It's connected with the soil, as Guilio had explained in the technical. A soil which is not porous can't hold any water. So the more porous it gets, the more permeable it gets. That means you have spaces in between. And it's those spaces which hold the water or let the air through. And if you take it on a wider context, of course, it's the porosity of everything, of the buildings, society, whatever. And then just wanted to look at you have the porosity. I guess it's steps. The proportions in architecture and town planning, everything, proportions are very important. And proportions to field spaces, proportions of the buildings. So it's just kind of elements which have led further into what we're doing. So here we have typical, this is more like a sort of a little plaza kind of thing. It's a bit fuzzy. But this is a typical street where one feels kind of comfortable. And this gets very uncomfortable. I mean, it's basically speaks for itself. It's just different ratios of spaces and roads and streets. So then we thought, okay, let's explore something in practice just to get a sense of the width of roads in relation to the height of buildings and how the spaces feel, how the shading works. And so this is just streets of Pondicherry. This is Nehru Street, so this is a much more shared space, a lot of public functions, public space. It has different proportions, it has different functions. And the beauty of shared spaces being integrated into the urban fabric. And it creates so many possibilities. In this case, it's the temple which is there, which is totally integrated and works as a beautiful little sort of shaded space. As opposed to the beach road, which is very well planned or very nice looking kind of place, but it's very limited in its use because there's no shade there. So it can only be used at night or in the early morning or in the evening. So it would be so much more usable if there was more shade on the beach road. Just then people could use it during the day as well. So that was kind of the take from that aspect. Then looking into planned green infrastructure, or rather unplanned, not properly planned green infrastructure. We see here in Pondi, the trees have grown and the buildings are much too close, so it doesn't really work well. It gets kind of chaotic. It looks very pretty, but in the long run, it's kind of doesn't work very well. So there's also examples where it's semi-planned. At least they've kept some space for the trees, so this will hopefully turn out to be a bit better. So these are just examples to guide us further as to what is already being done somewhere and what we can look at. So then I looked at the Crown Road, the section, and what is being done elsewhere in the world. And as it is a shared space, I said, well, then let's share it. Let's put the cars to be the guests on the Crown because they're supposed to be phased out. And even whether it's a shuttle bus or whatever it is, it can always take the back seat. And we give this Crown to the cyclists and the pedestrians. So the whole idea is this is basically a 7-meter wide stretch for cyclists. Here, this was, they felt it was a bit narrow, so they widened it. They reduced the part of the vehicle, and they increased the cycle paths on both sides so that two cyclists could comfortably cycle beside each other, which comes to a road of 7 meters. So this whole thing is 7 meters. It doesn't include the pedestrians. The pedestrians are aside. But I feel basically it can be less also. This is just to show that even in the worst case scenario, 2 emergency vehicles can pass each other, and there's even still space for cyclists at that point. So I like a lot of the proposals, people reducing the width of the road to even much further. And then I went into analyzing the mobility a little bit. Basically, I stole the mobility from Fabian and Henrik and copied it one-on-one. This is just sort of an explanation of the different areas and why those choices were made in relation to the mobility, and why I made those choices, why I kept that. And this is a little zoom in, so then it's basically keeping the existing roads as already, then we add some roads, some paved. This loop in the industrial zone to bring in the traffic. I hesitate to go through the farm and the pony farm here and the Kotakrai farm, but okay. But definitely in this whole area of the center field, as we have this road right parallelly, and this is again looking at the next 5 to 7 years, we certainly do not need any tar roads or any paved roads here. Oh yeah, this is the outer ring road. So again, I just basically took that same concept and kept a lot of the roads and as cycle paths. Then looking at infrastructure. David said, don't forget to dream, do crazy stuff. So I said, okay, let me look at infrastructure. So, so I said, okay, what kind of infrastructure do we need where and when, or at least when, so, and how can that be done? Yeah. So then I made a little diagram for myself. Where is what? So this is the residential zone. You would have a fixed infrastructure on the outer side because most of the development is on the outside. This is the center field, which is very little developed, but it can be in the future. We'll need infrastructure in the future, probably on 2 sides because it's the highest density residential zone. This is the international zone. It probably does not need infrastructure on 2 sides because it's very low density in terms of infrastructural needs. Then we go through Darkali, where one would have a different type of infrastructure because it doesn't really need to be connected to anything. I mean, it just needs to go through. Then the industrial zone, for now there's not that much happening, but it's supposed to be happening soon, so we put infrastructure there, keep the possibility for later. We have the bliss, again, we don't need to connect to anything, so we put a different type of infrastructure, and then here we have cultural zone and the Mahalakshmi Park. So the idea of this is that we have conduits under the Crown Road with junction boxes, which can later then connect further infrastructure as and when needed. Because my whole idea is we don't know what the future holds, and technology is advancing. And with everything, with climate change and the way things are, my idea is we should always build the absolute minimum of what is possible, because we don't know what will be possible in the future. So we build what is needed now and keep the possibility open for what may be possible in the future. So then looking at what kind of infrastructure can be done where, I actually talked to an expert in Hyderabad, and this is what he proposed, to have precast conduits, which can be house all the infrastructure. I'm not saying this is the exact size, this is just what I got online, with these junction boxes, which are really big, They're actually man-high, and everything can be connected and then reconnected and changed in there. And in these park areas, we can just have conduit pipes. You can put in a whole bunch of pipes in there, and then you just pull in your infrastructure, keep empty pipes, you can put them in. And yes, Toby said it was really expensive. But this is much cheaper in the long run because it gives all the possibilities of expansion in the future. It can change. And you don't have to dig up every time. I just see the cycle path, Arati, Grace. They're digging it up by hand again to put in a cable. It's the so manyth time. So this is, if this is what's going to happen every time in Auroville, it's going to cost much more than in making an investment one time. So the whole thing is you just put in the things where needed, where necessary, and then you expand as and when needed. So it's not such a huge investment anyway. So this is just little sketches of how it could be. These are the flexible pipes which come into the junction box, and they can come out where and how needed. And these are the conduits with all the pipes neatly arranged. It can be in the ground, half in the ground, or even above the ground where the water needs to flow underneath. Just to show how neatly it can be done, they all have their little things of how everything can be connected. Auzolan's idea of the conduit system. So then moving into more natural environment. To understand, I just wanted to understand like how did the forests evolve where they are. So basically it relates to where the high percolation or high infiltration areas are in Auroville. So it's kind of a natural thing that the forests grew best there and were planted there. And then we have the overlay of the galaxy. So also here we see again like actually by chance or not by chance, a lot of those areas are very low built up areas. They're not high density areas. And then I go into my proposals of what I want to just propose for different areas. So this is the Darkali, International Zone Darkali Park area. Basically there you see the whole Darkali Park forest. It's a huge area. So I wanted to create a spot because this is the international zone. So I thought, okay, what can we do there? We have the beautiful forest, and something can be done because, so I wanted to just create a space where people can meet, informal meetings, cafes, whatever, singing, yoga, all these kind of things can happen there. And there could be nice space also for actually a beautiful place for the people of Kotakura village to come and enjoy the forest and maybe, I don't know, learn, but just also to have a place because they don't have a nice forest place, as far as I know, where they can. So it's yeah, just an informal kind of meeting place for people to enjoy the forest while still. This is part of Pavneet's presentation where she wanted to explore more the galaxy and how that interacts with the landscape, but as she hasn't been able to put anything in, I just left it for now. And then I go to the other side of the Darkali Park, so which is this again the same situation actually. It's still the forest, it's close to the Kali temple, and with all the water percolation there. And it's connecting to the industrial zone. So I said, okay, what are the functions which would make sense to have there? So it would be a place where people working in the industrial zone could come and have whatever, enjoy the forest. There could be cafes, there could be eateries, there could be walks in the forest, meeting places, places for markets for the people to sell and mini expos for their products. So basically a shared space, but with a slightly different kind of idea than the other side of thing. Okay. And then there's this line of force, which a lot of people have talked about, and I love the way Ganesh and Neha presented it with the water. So I did actually, in addition to what they've done, my idea was just to plant a really dense TDF forest on that line of force to bring it to signify the force of nature, and very beautifully put by Neha. I've forgotten the words now, but force of, yeah, the line of force and the force of life. So just to emphasize that and to signify. So those two things could work really well together. And then we have the next line of force, which is half on the canyon. So I said, okay, well, then we do half a forest and half a line of force, or half constructed something. Yeah. Then I just had I just wanted to a quick look at the industrial zone, the lines of force. And again, I come to the thing of the climate and the minimalism and the permeability. All these things kind of come together where I think like the lines of force or the big buildings shouldn't touch the ground too much to keep the ground open for people to move, for the wind to go, for the water to infiltrate or run through. So these are just impressions of whatever it could be. Further that, and the lines of force are quite close together in that area, so it would be just also exploring the spaces in between, what actually happens in those spaces. And then climatically appropriate, big subject, complicated, on big scale buildings, but what is important is to take into consideration the wind direction, shading of facades, which is not possible in high buildings, so then one has to see how is that done. Just some examples of buildings with big sunshades, setbacks, green facades. Yeah, taking in consideration building materials is also important. If we just continue to build everything in concrete, then we're not really doing Auroville justice. And then what the functions could be in those lines of force or in the industrial zone. Generally, I really like this example of the market hall in Rotterdam, where you have this huge building, which inside actually is a huge market hall, and then above, and this is all like offices and residences, so everything is happening in that one building. And then just, then again, I skip this one and this one. And then I get to the sections of the crown. It's been, a lot of people have talked about this. So the explorations of how it could be shaded. So if we have reduced the width, I haven't actually reduced the width of the crown much, or not at all. What I've done is I've put the infrastructure always in exactly the same position on the outside of the crown. And then what changes is the width of where the planting can be and the width and the position of the road. I didn't put measurements there, but that's the idea. So anyway, so that basically the road would be shaded in most parts of the day and year, and it wouldn't create a heat island. And then we go over to, like in the park areas, we still have the infrastructure at the same position in the conduit, either in the conduit or underground pipes. And we just have a very narrow little cycle path which goes through the park. It can be meandering wherever we want. And in the forest, all there is actually the infrastructure and basically sand cycle paths like we have them now. And then on the plaza, again, we have the same situation. Probably there we'll need two infrastructure things, corridors, so we just have a bigger space. But we always know where our infrastructure is. So this is just the idea. We have the infrastructure trench on the outside, and then it goes under the road at intervals and with the junction boxes. So this is just some examples of the shared space, the bicycles and the cars, where the car is definitely the outlaw here, or whatever, unwanted guest. And then I looked into the residential zone a bit, and a lot of others have done so as well, just to look at what the functions which are envisioned in the residential zone, and that it needs to be densified. I think that's one of the next things we should be looking into as a community. And making sure that the water can go, and seeing what is possible in which area. So this is Surrender, Arka, Mahalakshmi home, and it's a kind of a no man's land. We can't build more there, but we can bring the park in. So the park is here, so we can bring the park into that space and make it into a nice little public park area, which is inside, close to the road. And here, I personally think that we should have more connections with the Greenbelt, the residential zone, and the inner city green corridors, not only for ourselves, but also for the water and for the wildlife. Because if we cut them off, if we build dikes and fences, it's not going to work very well. So this is just looking at where the water can and might flow. And yeah, this is this area. Then keeping in mind whatever, this is the Santé, very bad sketch, but just the idea of the biophilic design, having green in and around health facilities is really important, and not only health facilities, but also offices and residential buildings. And so making this crown, I've kept it as a very neat line, but the whole idea is to put traffic calming measures so that it can actually become a public space with different things happening on it and in it. And Marie and other people have said we need shading devices, and that is absolutely correct. I haven't incorporated any of that here, but it's the idea. And I can go back. So then, just by sketching this, I came to the point there's these little pockets of things left here and there. So, and I just thought it would be nice to have little spaces for contemplation and little private kind of places to go by yourself or with a few friends or whatever, which is not everything is all it needs to be public space. It can also just be a little private space in between, a nice little green sort of courtyard or just something to experience. It doesn't always have to be, everything has to be public. Some people are also just more introvert. And then the Crown Solar Kitchen Plaza, which is, I think, something we should also develop as soon as possible to actually create that space for all those public activities, and where we can informally meet together, meet and do things, which all these cafes, eateries, outdoor performances. So this is just some images of what is possible, what would work, what wouldn't work, whatever. And then if we look further into the future to develop this stretch into the next plaza, which is something I stole from Henrik, which his plazas worked out. So that's it.